Was the old man a fool or a prophet? Was this a final, twisted joke or an act of pure, unadulterated grace? I've asked myself these questions 1,000 times, and the answer, like the truth about the rich, is never simple. You're here because you crave that raw, unfiltered look behind the polished facade. You want the truth of how a blind groundskeeper, a man whose hands knew nothing but soil, inherited $500 million and brought a dynasty to its knees. I'm giving it to you, right now, behind closed doors. Don't forget to slide your finger over that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter of this mess. You won't believe what happens next. They call the reading of a will a solemn occasion. Bullshit. It's a blood sport in silk ties, and I had the best seat in the house. The mahogany table stretched out, reflecting the predatory gleam in the eyes of the Thorne family. A flock of perfectly tailored vultures waiting for their patriarch, Maxwell Thorne, to finally feed them. And then the lawyer cleared his throat. I remember the exact moment. The air in the penthouse office, usually thick with old money and expensive leather, suddenly became brittle. The lawyer, Mr. Hastings, didn't look up from the parchment, but his voice, usually a dry rasp, was clear as a bell. To Mr. Marcus Thorne, the eldest grandson, and his sister, Mrs. Victoria Vance, a combined total of $10 million. A gasp, not of disappointment, but of sheer arrogant expectation. 10 million was nothing to them, a formality. They wanted the core. They wanted the empire. Marcus leaned forward, his jaw set, a predator calculating the time to pounce. He shot me a look, a brief dismissive flick of his eyes, as I sat there, quietly, wearing my patched-up chore coat, the scent of damp earth and wood smoke clinging to me. I was just Elias Stone, the blind groundskeeper, the charity case. A fixture, but never family. And the remainder of the estate, Mr. Hastings continued, his eyes finally lifting, sweeping over the horrified faces, including the entirety of Thorne Industries and approximately $500 million in liquid assets, is to be bequeathed to Mr. Elias Stone. Silence. Then the explosion. That's absurd. It's a joke, Marcus screamed, slamming his fist on the table. He's a gardener, a blind one at that. He has no legal competence. Victoria shrieked, a high-pitched sound that was more rage than shock. This is manipulation, a mistake. He worked for pennies. He can't even see the contract. The room was a swirling chaos of accusations, a deafening symphony of entitled despair. They were all standing now, their expensive suits rumpling, their masks finally torn off. But I sat still. I couldn't see them. No, but I could hear them. I could hear the exact pitch of their greed. My blood, usually calm, was starting to boil, not with anger, but with a cold, terrifying clarity. 5 years. 5 years I tended Maxwell's roses, listened to his secrets, and endured their sneering contempt. Mr. Thorne anticipated this, Mr. Hastings stated, his voice a steady hand in the storm. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, over the rim of his glasses. Congratulations, Mr. Thorne. The shock was a physical blow to everyone. My head snapped up. Mr. Thorne? What was he saying? My quiet world had just been obliterated, replaced by a $500 million time bomb. Marcus's face, I knew without seeing it, must have been a magnificent tableau of hate. He took a menacing step toward me. What game are you playing, Stone? Who are you? He was close enough for me to smell his desperate, expensive cologne. I gripped the worn armrests of my chair. My hands were rough, honest, unlike theirs. I just tend the garden, Mr. Thorne, I said. my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise. That's all I've ever done. But now I realized the garden wasn't just the manicured lawn. The garden was the whole damn empire, and I had just been handed the shears. The pruning was about to begin, and I knew exactly who the first weeds would be. The word thorn was a hammer blow, echoing long after the lawyer, Mr. Hastings, had ushered the spitting family members out. Now it was just him, Hastings, and me in the suffocating quiet of Maxwell's office. I had inherited a fortune, but I felt only the weight of the dirt still clinging to my shoes, a stark contrast to the millions being discussed. I sat there, the blind man, who could suddenly see everything about their rotten little world. Let me take you back 5 years. That's when I came to this estate. I needed the work. Maxwell Thorne needed a keeper for the only thing he truly trusted, his garden. He was a monster to everyone else, ruthless in business, icy with his relatives. But with me, he was quiet. People pitied me, the poor blind man tending the roses of the richest bastard in the state. They thought I was harmless. That was their first and fatal mistake. I never asked for more than my meager paycheck. I only tend the soil, Mr. Thorne, was my standard reply to everyone. I meant it. The soil was honest. The people in that house were not. Marcus, the primary snake, started his game early. Maybe a year after I arrived. He'd corner me by the tool shed, all expensive cologne and condescending smiles. Elias, he'd say, leaning in close, his voice thick with false camaraderie. A man of your talents should be earning more. The old man is going senile, right? He talks about his past, doesn't he? Who is the woman in the faded picture he keeps in his library? A simple question, $1 million trap. I only tend the soil, sir, I would reply, never raising my voice. The power of silence. It's a terrifying weapon when you know the other person is desperate for information. My refusal was like a tiny, constant leak in his carefully constructed plan. He'd offer me cash, $1,000 once, just for an itinerary of Maxwell's visitors. I turned it down. The look on his face, that flash of suspicion mixed with outright disgust for my peasant morality, was priceless. He couldn't compute someone refusing easy money. He assumed I was stupid, not principled. My real sanctuary wasn't the greenhouse. It was the way I learned to see the garden. I could feel the slightest droop of a rose petal, the change in the soil's texture. I knew when a drought was coming before the weatherman did. And I knew, even more surely, when Maxwell Thorne was truly alone. The garden was thriving under my care, a lush, vibrant shield against the moral decay happening inside the mansion. Then came the weird questions. They didn't start until about 6 months before his death. I was weeding the perennial bed, and he was sitting on his stone bench, his voice barely audible above the hum of the cicadas. Elias, he'd begun, his voice surprisingly soft. If you could see again, what is the first thing you would look at? I told him I'd look at the texture of the soil. He scoffed, but not unkindly. Then he went deeper. Tell me, Elias, what is the true purpose of money? Is it to buy things, or is it to buy freedom? That question hung in the air, like the scent of ozone before a storm. I answered him truthfully, speaking not as a groundskeeper, but as a man who had lost everything but his sight. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't weeding the garden anymore. I was taking the test. And the true reason for his strange curiosity, the secret history that tied us together, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about the silent, lonely tycoon I served. The stage was set, and the players, especially the vultures, were about to get a painful lesson in perception. The air around the mansion didn't just grow colder, it became toxic. Maxwell's health was failing fast, and the vultures smelled fresh carrion. Marcus and Victoria stopped pretending to live their own lives. They descended, camping out in the lavish guest wings, their presence a palpable, suffocating force. Every conversation was a thinly veiled interrogation about their uncle's medication, his accounts, his state of mind. They were like noisy rats scratching behind the walls, but their focus remained on me, the easy target. They ramped up the contempt. It was no longer subtle. "Elias, this room is a mess," Victoria sneered one afternoon, pointing to a single misplaced throw pillow with a perfectly manicured finger. "Get it. Clean it. You're paid to be a domestic, not a decorator." Domestic. That word was meant to shrink me, to remind me of my place. Beneath the soil, certainly beneath her Italian leather boots. I just smiled, a small internal victory. They thought my blindness made me meek. It actually made me a superb listener. I heard their whispers, their plotting, the pure, corrosive entitlement that was eating them alive. Then came the assignment. It was a week before Maxwell died. He called me into his library, a room he rarely let anyone touch. The smell of old paper and dust motes danced in the light. "Elias," his voice was weak, scratchy, like dried leaves. "I need you to do something for me. Something no one else can do." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't about the azaleas. He handed me a small, sealed, unmarked brown paper package. It was light, almost weightless. "Take this to Mr. Hastings' office. Today, hand it only to him. If anyone, Elias, asks you what's in it, you tell them it's a packet of rare midnight bloom heirloom seeds. Understand?" I nodded, the gravity of the task settling on my shoulders. A package of lies, a trust exercise, an absolute test. Of course, Marcus intercepted me by the back gate, precisely 20 minutes later. He was waiting, leaning against his polished black SUV, looking like an expensive roadblock. "Out late, Elias?" he asked, his voice smooth, too friendly. "What's the package? Mail for the old man?" "Just a delivery, sir," I said, keeping my breathing steady, my hands neutral. "A delivery of what, precisely?" He took a step closer, his shadow engulfing me. "Open it. Let me see. I'm handling all of Uncle's affairs now." The test. Maxwell wasn't just testing my honesty. He was testing my resolve against the very people who would soon try to destroy me. I held the package tighter. "Mr. Thorne was very specific, sir. These are rare seeds. Midnight blooms. Very delicate. I cannot risk them being opened until they reach the lawyer." The conviction in my voice, the utter flatness of my tone, threw him off balance. He saw the gardener, the simpleton, being rigidly loyal. He didn't see the man who knew how easily his own family would betray him. He scowled, but ultimately backed off. "Fine, just do your job, Stone. Don't touch anything else." That was the last time I saw Maxwell Thorne alive. 2 days later, his heart gave out in the night. The vultures rejoiced. Marcus found me in the garden the next morning, digging up the winter bulbs. He had a look of cold, final authority. "You're done, Stone. Clean out your room. The groundskeeper's blind shed is now going to be a pool house." He threw a severance check at my feet, which landed silently in the dirt. The blind groundskeeper will be kicked out after he's tidied up this mess. Humiliation. That was their final gift to me. I picked up the check, dusted off the soil, and walked away, every step carrying the weight of their judgment. Little did they know, the package I delivered wasn't seeds. It was the key to their entire rotten kingdom, and by passing their test, I had just locked them out. The reading of the will wasn't a fluke. It was the precise, calculated harvest of 5 years of observation. The shock had worn off, replaced by raw, frantic anger. Marcus was still screaming, something about civil court and fraud. Victoria was sobbing into a handkerchief that probably cost more than my first car. I just sat there, the eye of the hurricane, still smelling faintly of dirt. They were focused on the $500 million. I was focused on the simple injustice that brought me to this moment. Mr. Hastings held up a hand, silencing the hysterical chaos with an authority that was far more effective than Marcus's bluster. The will is legally sound. Every page, initialed and witnessed. It was coercion. Undue influence, Marcus roared. This man is mentally and physically incapable of managing a trust. He can't see the books. Hastings offered the coldest, most satisfying smile I'd ever heard in a room. Mr. Thorne anticipated this exact objection, Marcus. He paused for maximum effect. Do you recall the package Mr. Stone delivered to my office a week before Mr. Thorne's passing? The one containing the rare, midnight bloom seeds? Marcus went rigid. What does that have to do with anything? It was garbage, a distraction. It was the test, Hastings corrected, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Mr. Thorne filled that package with a blank sheet of paper. The will was drafted long ago, but he kept it conditional. He wrote in a signed codicil that if Elias failed to deliver the package because he was bribed, compromised, or even simply curious enough to open the package on his own, the will would be revoked and the estate would pass to the established charitable trusts. I felt a rush of adrenaline. The blank paper. My simple honesty had been the final, most crucial barrier to their greed. Marcus turned toward me, his breathing ragged. You knew. I only tend the soil, sir. I repeated the lie. But this time, it held the weight of a $500 million truth. But Hastings wasn't finished. He tapped the parchment again. However, that is not the only detail Mr. Thorne anticipated. Twist 2. I felt the air shift, even from where I sat. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about history. You are correct, Marcus, that the bulk of the estate is bequeathed to Elias Stone. But the will contains a second sealed codicil that Mr. Thorne insisted be read only after the initial shock had passed. Hastings looked directly at me. Mr. D. Thorne, in fact, changed his name legally 5 months ago. The document I hold confirms that Maxwell Thorne publicly, though secretly, recognized his son. Elias Stone's birth certificate has been legally amended. I froze. Son. The word slammed into me, cutting through all the confusion and the quiet years. I wasn't just the groundskeeper. I was a bloodline, a secret kept hidden from the world, and most tragically, from me. My father, the icy tycoon, hadn't just tested my character. He had claimed me with his dying breath. Hastings continued, sealing their fate. Elias Stone is not just the heir. He is the legitimate, sole surviving son, recognized just before his passing. Your challenge, Marcus, is baseless. The lawyer then pressed a button on the speakerphone. A distinct, gravelly voice filled the room. Maxwell Thorne's voice. Marcus, Victoria, if you are hearing this, it means you showed your true colors. I used hidden cameras and sound recorders in the house to log every cruel word. every demand, every attempt to pressure Elias. The air was sucked from the room. The tycoon had turned his house into a meticulously documented trap. You despised him for his sightlessness and simplicity. I chose him for the very same reasons. He saw with his heart what you missed with your greedy eyes. He is the only one worthy of my name. He is Elias Thorne. Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. The game was over. The victim they had mocked had just been revealed as the queen, holding the deed to the entire kingdom. The next move, the terrifying, righteous move, was mine. The air was no longer just thick. It was suffocating with the sound of Maxwell's voice, a voice that had meticulously cataloged their every act of avarice. The recordings weren't just about the verbal abuse. They documented Marcus discussing how to accidentally increase the dosage of Maxwell's blood pressure medication. A little push is all he needs, Victoria. We just have to make it look natural. Marcus's voice echoed, cold and utterly devoid of humanity. Victoria's weak agreement followed, sealing their collective fate. The greed had curdled into outright criminality. Their faces, Marcus's a sickly pale mask of terror, Victoria's distorted by genuine panic, were a sight I didn't need eyes to appreciate. They had gambled everything on my perceived weakness, and they had lost spectacularly. The silence, after Maxwell's final words faded, was the silence of a collapsing world. I finally stood up. My chair scraped against the polished marble floor. It was a small sound, but it cut through the room like a gunshot. The blind groundskeeper, now the rightful heir, stood taller than he had ever stood before. I had spent years being invisible. Now, I was the only thing they could see. "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet, steady, and utterly unlike the apologetic tone they were used to. "You always thought I couldn't see the rot in this house." I paused, letting my words sink in, pulling them close to the edge of the pit they had dug. "But the truth is, I've been seeing your uncle's genuine loneliness and your moral decay far longer than any of you with your perfectly functioning sight." Marcus took a hesitant step back. He was used to being the bully. He didn't know how to handle a target that suddenly held the rifle. Mr. Hastings cleared his throat, sensing the shift from legal declaration to personal vengeance. "Elias, Mr. Thorne, what are your instructions regarding the estate and the unfortunate revelations concerning your family?" I didn't look at Hastings. I spoke directly into the silence that Marcus and Victoria inhabited. "I will not accept the Thorne name while it is stained with this level of dishonor and criminality." I turned my head, precisely locating Marcus's terrified presence. "Mr. Hastings, my first official act as the rightful owner is to immediately initiate criminal proceedings against Marcus and Victoria for attempted homicide and corporate malfeasance. Every recording, every financial trail they left, I want it all used." Victoria let out a strangled cry. "Elias, please, we are family. We can negotiate." "Negotiate?" I gave a humorless laugh. "You paid me pennies to keep your uncle's garden beautiful while you plotted to steal his life and his fortune. You lost the right to family the moment you threw that severance check at my feet." I delivered the final blow with surgical precision. "You have exactly 24 hours to vacate the property. Take only what you brought with you. If you attempt to touch any corporate assets or any of the properties you thought you'd inherit, you will find a team of lawyers already waiting to file restraining orders. You have no claim, no power, Get out of my house. I felt the immense, satisfying weight of the world shifting under my feet. The power of money wasn't just about what it could buy, it was about the justice it could enforce. I had been tested, and now it was their turn to endure the pruning. I, the blind groundskeeper, was ready to cultivate a new, honest legacy from the ashes of their poisoned empire. The irony was delicious. Marcus and Victoria, stripped of their power and privilege, had left the mansion within the 24-hour limit, their exit silent and utterly without dignity. They went from plotting in silk to facing criminal charges and financial ruin. Justice, it turns out, is the ultimate fertilizer. As I was later told, Marcus ended up working in a low-paying warehouse job, a cruel but fitting fate for a man who believed true work was beneath him. The contrast was stark. He finally had to see the world of labor, while I, the blind man, was given the power to change it. I did not keep the Thorne Manor as a monument to greed. My father, Maxwell, had sought a worthy heir, not just a blood relative. I made the estate into what he implicitly asked for, a place of purpose. The Thorne Mansion, with its marble halls and endless wings, was immediately converted into the Maxwell Thorne Center for Vocational Training and Rehabilitation, dedicated to empowering people with disabilities, teaching them trades like coding, artisan crafts, and yes, advanced horticulture. I sat in the garden one sunny afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine. It was the same stone bench where Maxwell had asked me about the true purpose of money. Now, the space was filled not with the sound of his lonely sighs, but with the cheerful, busy chatter of students, a symphony of second chances. I gave a rare interview a few months later. The reporter, skeptical and sharp, asked me the obvious question. Mr. Thorne, you have sightlessness, yet you've taken on the immense task of leading this vast enterprise. How do you see your legacy? I smiled. I lost my physical vision a long time ago. But that loss was the greatest gift my father could ever recognize in me. It forced me to see with something more valuable, the heart. I leaned in, my voice carrying the full weight of my new authority. My father had $500 million, and he lived in utter isolation. He was searching for someone who knew the difference between value and price. He looked past the inherited eyes and saw the honest hands. This center is his true legacy. It is a place dedicated to teaching people that the power of sight is nothing compared to the clarity of character. I ran my rough hand over the textured bark of the old oak tree, a tree I had nursed back to health years ago. It was a tangible symbol of the power of honest, consistent care. The money didn't buy me happiness. It bought me the freedom to enact justice and restore meaning. The weeds are pulled, the soil is pure, and the harvest is good. That's the whole story. How a dynasty crumbled, not from external threat, but from internal rot, and how an act of pure faith delivered by a blind man became the ultimate reckoning. If this story of justice, family scandal, and unexpected power resonated with you, and if you believe that character should always outweigh privilege, then let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What kind of seeds are you planting in your own life? And if you enjoyed this journey behind the closed doors of power, don't forget to subscribe to Behind Closed Doors and hit that bell to join our community. We have so many more secrets to uncover.